We are live.
Okay, good morning, art historians, and welcome to our second day of broadcasting with some of the AP Art History content. My name is Allison Napier, and I will be your guide today through the content. Just nice to see everybody, even though it's kind of a virtual situation. And a couple of things I wanted to talk about before we get started. We will be covering new content today, a little bit of stuff from Content Area 9, and next week we'll cover our Unit 9. We'll cover some stuff from Unit 10. This is to make sure that you at least get your feet wet in all of these different areas, which colleges will expect you to have experienced for next year. And also, because they're great areas, John did a wonderful job yesterday with the Ahua Cape. He says it better than I do too. And today I will be working with you on the book mask. Next week, or in about a week or so, we'll cover some of the key outstanding topics. There'll be a calendar that they put out to kind of keep you guys abreast of what's happening each day. And so we get started now. Let me go ahead and get my PowerPoint up and running. So we will cover the book mask today, but we'll also be making some cross-cultural connections to some African masks, which are on the exam content. Again, my name is Allison Napier. I was an art history teacher for years, and now I'm doing some adjuncting at Tidewater Community College and some other institutions while I work on a PhD, which is another story for another day, but that's going well. So we get started with 9.2, talking about interactions within and across cultures in Pacific art. That's our topic, and our skill focus today, explaining how and why, we have context influencing artistic decisions about form, style, materials, content, and or function, and how this impacts the creation of a work of art or a related group of works. Our learning objective, thinking about purpose, intended audience, and patron, because these masks were made for someone, and those decisions and preferences, cultural priorities will all play into the production of the objects. And so we're going to cover the book mask, as well as make some cross-cultural comparisons to some material on the exam with the African masks. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of start where we stopped yesterday with John's warm-up, or as a warm-up, we're going to do a little review with his prompt that he gave us. So I'll give you just a few seconds to read that over. And so with any AP prompt, we want to kind of break it down a little bit into our tasks. What do we have to get done here today? So we need to choose and fully identify a work of art. That's going to require 2 identifiers from the course exam and description, or the CED as we call it. You've been given some choices down here: the Oba of Benin, King Narmer, and Henry IV. So if you use any of those works, you'll have to have 2 identifiers in addition to the title. If you choose something off of that's not on that list, if you have that option, then of course the title and 1 other identifier will be sufficient. So we have to talk about the distinct features of the leader's dress and how that communicates prestige, power, or authority. And we're going to talk about visual features of this and kind of think about it in conjunction with the feather cape. So for my choice, I went with the Oba of Benin because I thought that that was a great option that John gave. So here you see it. This is from Content Area 6, number 169. Not that you need to know that stuff, but this is the wall plaque from the Oba's palace. And we can see the Oba here, the central figure, the Oba. So we automatically can recognize we have some hierarchy of scale. He is the largest. He is in the center, and he's flanked by attendants who are smaller in stature. When we were talking about his dress, though, one of the things we notice is a distinctive coral beaded regalia that he would wear. So we're seeing a lot of these kind of coral layers of necklaces and accoutrements. We of course see the helmet. So those right there would be two signify as far as his dress, prestige that he carries. There's some other things that we could kind of connect here as well. If we wanted to expand out past dress, we could talk about not only the use of scale, the fact he's riding a side saddle on horseback while the others are standing. And this work, of course, would have been connected with the other plaques from the Opus Palace. So a quick review there and kind of making the connection to the feather cape, which was presented yesterday. And I also want to offer you this question from the question bank. Now, multiple choice isn't on the new exam format for this year, only this year, but that doesn't mean that multiple choice questions aren't a way to review power and authority and different skills and kind of content information, kind of quick bullets and checks for understanding. So I'll give you a second to read this multiple choice question about the cape, and then we'll talk about that real quick. So as you finish up reading the question, always try to narrow down with a multiple choice the different options that you have. Try to get down to two good ones if you can. The camouflage for the ruler doesn't really make sense. It's bright red and yellow, so that's not going to really camouflage you in the rainforest. So we can at least toss that one out. The balance between the ruler and the community, the relationship there, I'm not sure that that's a great choice either, because the ruler clearly wears this as an element of prestige and power. So we work our way down, and option D really kind of is the correct response here, that it embodies that divine power of the ruler, in addition to drawing attention to his power and authority as a secular figure that is connected to the ancestors and to the gods. As we enter into our new material for today, we're dealing with skill 2C. So how and why context influences artistic decisions about form, style, materials, content, and how these all create meaning in a work of art, or how they impact the actual creation of a work of art. With the book Masks and Other Masks, one thing I want you guys to kind of think about, down at the bottom of this slide, you'll see things to consider. Why do people wear masks? Well, for most of us, we have had experience with some sort of masks. If you're a child of the 70s like myself, then you wore those plastic Halloween masks in your costumes, or you watched Scooby-Doo where they unmasked the villain. So this idea of taking on another persona or concealing an identity, as well as structuring or revealing a new identity, is really why masks are used cross-culturally. Masks are experienced often in performance, ideally in performance. Masks are meant to be worn and shown for the most part to the public or some sort of audience. Unfortunately, we experience masks a lot of times stripped of context in glass cases in museums with little placards. So our museum experience is pretty much a disconnect from the actual way these things are intended to function in the real world. In addition, we can talk about, especially in the creation of masks and in some of the art history content, cultural priorities and how that impacts the materials that are chosen, the choices of how those materials are worked and put together. Sometimes the actual process of mask making is considered a ritual in itself that channels ancestral spirits. And so how do the materials, techniques, and the uses of masks, how do they add other layers of meaning. So those are all kind of things we're going to think about as we work through the content today. So we start in content area 9 with the book mask. And this mask comes from the Torres Strait region in the Pacific. The Torres Strait is this body of water here between Papua New Guinea and Australia, and there are hundreds of islands in here. There's some of them so small that they aren't even terribly visible on this map. Most of them are actually uninhabited. This region has a very rich cultural tradition, like so many other areas that we've studied, and produce very interesting art pieces. They have ceremonies, customs, a lot of these things involving funerary services and rituals with dancing and feasting. And they can even draw, as far as cultural interaction, they might draw islanders from all over the region to observe or participate. All depends on the nature of the ritual and whether it's a public or private affair. The mask materials are turtle shell, wood, fiber, feathers, and shells, and it was created sometime in the mid to late 19th century, about the time we're seeing cultural contact with colonization. They're used during funeral ceremonies and increase rituals, which are rituals designed to ensure bountiful harvests and an abundance of fish and game for the culture. It's speculated that these masks may somehow represent ancestors or legendary heroes. And they're worn over the head like a helmet. And there's some sort of a hybrid of a human face with an animal form. And so this kind of combination is meant to really captivate the audience. When the dancer's fully upright, then the mask is on top of the head, and you may only see the animal form, and that can be a crocodile or a bonito fish or a frigate bird in the example from the image set. And what these animals mean as far as how they connect, we believe that they have something to do with ancestral lines or kind of totemic animals, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So the masks are made from turtle shell plates that have been carefully shaped and curved and then tied together, usually decorated with some sort of incised pattern. And then we see a little bit of white ochre used in some spots, especially around the eyes. They are a lot of times adorned with cassowary feathers and maybe some nut rattles. And turtle effigies or turtle shell effigies were recorded way back in the 1600s, first by the Spanish. So this is a long tradition. And so what you see here again is this composite human and animal imagery, which is very typical of this group of masks, because these are a type of work. So we have a lot of different book masks, even though they will look different and be unique in their own right, they do kind of fall into a larger category. So the ceremonies that we talk about, the funerary ceremonies, these increase or harvest ceremonies, often dealing with senior men as the performers who wear the masks using these rustling costumes that may have grass and raffia on the body. And they enact events from the lives of the cultural heroes of the group, drawing from local traditions and narratives. They might be representing a personal or a family hero, an ancestral hero. A lot of times the animal on the top, in this case the frigate bird, represents this kind of personal totemic species or an animal maybe that's important to a certain clan or group. Taking a little closer look, we can see that these things are made up of a lot of pieces. So we see that the hawksbill turtle shells have been steamed to render them supple, then they're molded, incised, stained, and tied together. So they're technically kind of an assemblage of objects. The elements that they're composed of include things that were traded throughout the region, like cowrie shells, goa nuts, cassowary feathers, which came from New Guinea. Ochre came from Cape York, and then there are some other European materials also impacting the composition in some cases. The feathers, the shell, the raffia add not only texture, but a sense of materiality to the piece, even in some cases motion, which when these were performed in front of an audience with music, the feathers would have been moving, the raffia would have moved. Again, we're seeing it in a museum in a very static way. It's possible that the person represented could be an elder or an ancestor. We see this area here around the face, which suggests a beard, maybe someone that they're honoring that's important in the family lineage. A lot of pieces, as I mentioned, often stitched together and made up of forms that create the face, decorative elements, the bird. And so as this was performed and danced, it's likely that the dancer also made gestures of a bird. Perhaps, again, this is just a face of a hero. Maybe it's someone widely known. Maybe it's more of an ancestral hero. This mask on the top contains an image of a sculpture of a frigate bird. And so it's likely that the person was associated with the frigate bird, or that this was in some way associated with the wearer of the mask or the clan or the familial group. It could be a totem or some mythological creature that reflected lineage or a certain family group. The presence of the bird there, regardless of exactly how it connects, it's important, or it wouldn't be there. So it must have been regarded as unique and special. It might have even been something that they chose not to hunt, or especially this idea that maybe these birds or animals connected the physical and the spiritual worlds. As I mentioned, these are a type of work, so we see other examples. Here's a book mask collected by Alfred Court Haddon, who was an anthropologist working in the area in the late 1800s. This one with a bonito fish. You can still see the human-animal hybrid form, the use of the cowrie feathers, the goa nuts, the rattles, the geometric patterns, all of those things consistent with our mask from the image set. I found this in my research. I found this original listing, a sketch by Haddon, because as he collected these things, he would make notes. So he makes some notes that, again, the goa nuts, the cowrie feathers attached at various points. There's some red, white, and black decorations, the geometric patterns, all of these adding additional layers of meaning and importance to the mask for the wearer and possibly the audience as well. Another book mask collected by Haddon includes this crocodile mask. So in this one, it's actually kind of interesting to me that the crocodile is under the human head, whereas the fish and the frigate bird are on top of that human mask form. And it likely has something to do with the size of the crocodile bill, or that its kind of nose, how it projects out so far. Maybe it just balanced better that way. There's nothing I've found that says the face has to be under the animal form. And so here's an example that kind of reverses what we have. So a quick check for understanding. And what I want you to do is maybe look at all three of these masks together now and think about the visual and physical material characteristics that they share. And then kind of remind yourself what the different animals might mean. So I'm going to give you about a minute to think this over, maybe take some notes or jot something down. You might want to just look very carefully and kind of see what commonalities you have and what's similar, what's different. And so maybe about, 15, 20 seconds to wrap up. And as you finish kind of taking some notes and looking closely at these three masks, things you might have recognized or noticed or kind of pieced together, that these are all hybrid human and animal forms, or they have an animal aspect and a human aspect to them with the face portion of the mask. They all incorporate turtle shell. Cassowary feathers and goa nuts are also commonly used on these. Um, and that as far as the animals go, again, this idea that they are a totem, representative of a familial line, and might be significant enough that they weren't hunted or fished, all should be kind of things that you're working into your answer. So we move now from our book masks to a cross-cultural comparison of a couple African masks, which will be on the exam, or potential for the exam, I guess. And just like the question with the book masks, when you think about these, you should think about them also as as a member of a type of a work. Like they're part of a group, they're individual in their own right, but they also form a larger overall kind of population of masks. So we'll start with the Imblo mask, this one by the Bal peoples in the Côte d'Ivoire in West Africa. And this is a portrait mask of Moya Yanso, carved by Oye Kimu, please forgive my pronunciations, who is an artist in the town of Kami in the Côte d'Ivoire. And these face masks, carved in the Imblo style, are idealized portraits. They have high foreheads, arched brows that crest over downcast and heavy-lidded eyes that join in the middle to form a nose that's an inverted triangle and extends down towards the middle of the face, ending at its widest point parallel to a very small, geometrically shaped mouth. It shows a textured style with ornamental that rise above the head and contrast with a very smooth surface of the face to suggest clean and healthy skin. It also has some elements to suggest ritual scarification, which together with the hairstyle identify the mask as an idealized portrait of a particular person. So this is actually a portrait mask of an individual that is known. So these masks represent honored individuals that are not always, but often female. Both females and males can be depicted, but again, it's more common to have a female subject matter. So you have a reference with these downcast eyes, that reference this idealized state of beauty, wisdom, high moral status. This mask, commissioned by Moya Yanso, who was a dancer, commissioned by her husband. And the presence of the beard on this mask, this kind of area around the edge, does not suggest that or identified as male, but because they're found actually on masks of both male and female figures. The masks were worn during important civic events. Here you see the Imblo approaching the dance, and as the mask approaches, it's kept concealed. The mask is also accompanied by the honoree, if possible. So Moya Yanso, while she was living and able, would accompany her mask to the ritual. It's danced by men. The dance itself, called the Gababa. I don't think that's right pronunciation, but anyway, typically the male dancer was a spouse or a son or someone connected, some male connected to the honoree. So the Imblo masks are owned by the individuals that they represented, and when not in use, they were wrapped in cloth and kept hidden from sight. So they were meant to kind of wow the audience, increase their anticipation because they were kept out of sight. They were kind of shrouded by these fabrics as they approached. So when we talk about the Imblo mask, we're talking about something that's considered to be a high form of artistic expression in the Bal peoples, and until the 1980s, worn by the most accomplished male dancers. So this is a real honor to have one of these masks made for you. The next mask we look at is the Po mask from the Chalkwe people. This honors female ancestors. The representations are significant in that the Chalkwe trace their descent through their mother's family line, so they are a matrilineal culture. And what we see here is kind of this depiction of beauty, a young woman adorned with tattoos, earrings, elaborate hairstyle, and the name Plo referred to an adult woman who had given birth. There's also a mask known as the Moana Plo, which is a younger woman. But this is one of the older women, a representation of an older woman of childbearing age that had actually had children. It's a lot of times danced with its partner, the Chihongo, or the founding father. And when they dance together, they assure fertility and prosperity for the community. And this has been, these cultural ideals and representations have been around since pre-colonial times to inspire contemporary artists in the region. There's a large repertoire of mask types. The PWO performs a crucial role in transmitting culturally relevant information in the dances. The woman representing the ideal and comparable model for a fulfilled woman in this case. So the PWO, popular, highly used in this society. The male dancer dresses like a woman in a costume of braided fiber that completely covers and hides the identity. He wears a loincloth, carries a fan, and moves in very slow, precise steps, emulating the movements of a woman. When the mask becomes unusable, it is discarded. And when the masquerader dies, the mask is buried with him. When we actually look at the construction, we see that this is another one of those works comprised of a lot of pieces, like our book mask. We see that Chokwe women, the hairstyle here representing a typical hairstyle of Chokwe women, this made here out of fiber with a braided headband and heavy fringe. You can see on the face some renderings of tattoos. This on the right cheek, a tattoo known as the Sijingo in the combination with a cross, which represents a spiral bracelet, the knitted brows, the half-closed eyes, placed in large concave sockets with white kaolin clay to make them pronounced. Eyes, slender nose, elliptical mouth, all very delicately carved. These are very thin masks as well, carved out of what we think is Alstonia wood. So another group of works that, again, symbolizing not a specific ancestor to my knowledge, but well, a specific female ancestor possibly, but the concept of female ancestors and womanhood certainly. Our third mask is the Aka elephant mask. Elephants associated with power in the Cameroon grasslands. So not only the association with the animal, but the fact that they're constructed out of beads, which would have been traded, also signifying an expensive kind of material that would have associated them with high social rank. So the elephant mask made of colorful cloth and beads. It's a hood-like mask that goes over the head with the round eyes and the red beads and the white cloth and very strong navy blue overtones. Cowrie shells are used as a decoration on this mask, and then we get different patterns, isosceles triangles in some cases, or these almost hourglass-like shapes in the ears. And there are two long panels, which are meant to represent the elephant's trunk, one in the front and one in the back. They're worn as part of an ensemble by masqueraders that represent and perform as in these elite groups. Some of these masks may have headdresses like the one on the right, which has actually a leopard on the top. So again, these are a group of works, but they do have individuality within the set. The colors, the design, the beading, all results of aesthetic preferences. The supply of beads important, but these would have been worn by men's prestige societies like the Kiosi, which exist in the Bamileke kingdoms. So during funerary manifestations and royal displays, they would have emerged in a single file line from the house in the palace and entered a dancing field in front of the marketplace to perform. The tunics themselves are made of a cloth reserved only for elites and royal men. At times, they will also carry horse hair whisks, and there is a full costume that goes with this, although a lot of times the masks are what we see in museums more so than the full range of dress. So this Kuyosi elite masking society that wore these comprised of royal family members, wealthy title holders, ranking warriors, all coming together to dance and show off their power and authority to the larger audience. So you see these large round disc ears delineated by beads and red cloth. And again, this idea of worshiping the elephant as a symbol of sovereignty and royal authority, all of this ties in with the costuming. Black beads often representing a relationship with the living and the dead, white beads with ancestors and medicines, red beads, life and women, triangular patterns and zigzags, often trying to do some sort of configuration of the leopard spots or important forms and symbols for the cultural group. As we come to a close, some things to consider as we again kind of wrap it up and bring it back to what do masks do. So this idea that people wear masks because they want to disguise themselves or take on another persona. They want to channel ancestral spirits or make a connection between the secular and the sacred, a way to honor people living or deceased. We've seen all of these things going on here, a way to hope the ancestors will help us have a good harvest, protect power and authority of certain cultural groups. All of these play into the idea of what masks can do in different cultural settings. Masks conceal identity, but again, they also create new identities, and that these identities are performed and connect us to all sorts of different aspects of social structure and cultural importance, from gender to class to your kinship and different ancestors, as well as different social factors that help define a group or a person, and through their performance and their ritual reinforce these identities that they're creating. One of the things that really I always like to kind of drive home is that masks are meant to be performed. And when we see them in museums, we are seeing them kind of devoid of their original context. The intention for which they were created is not being fulfilled. So these items were taken through processes of colonialism and basically taken out of living performance and put into a very static setting that doesn't always tell us the whole story. So one of the reasons you have all these great contextual images in the image set is to kind of show you these things in action. And there are several good websites that actually will show you some of the dances for the elephant mask, or I didn't find really anything with the book too much, but there are some sites out there that will help you actually see these things as you're supposed to see them. And finally, cultural priorities determine how these things are made. They determine the materials used. So why are we using turtle shell in the Pacific versus hardwoods in Africa versus glass beads in other parts of Africa? Because of their value to different cultural groups, whether they're traded or they're rare or they're some sort of special commodity or the animal itself is held in some sacred esteem. These things all matter. And the techniques, steaming, curving, sewing, using special cloths, all of those add layers of significance that go beyond just surface appearances. So for tomorrow, I'll be back tomorrow. John and I will normally be alternating, but I'm going 2 days in a row because I needed his help with something for next week. So starting Monday, we'll be alternating for sure. But our question for you guys to think about tomorrow is this. I gave you an attribution question with an unknown work. So what you need to do is attribute it to the specific Pacific culture. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. And identify the corresponding work in the image set. Justify it by talking about the formal similarities. So do some visual analysis there and connect it to the work that you're saying, well, this is one of these types of masks and belongs in this group. And then explain how these works were created or how they were intended to be experienced in their original context. What were they made for? Who made them? How were they used? All of those things pretty important. Again, when you're doing this kind of attribution question and identification is involved, you've got to include the culture of origin on this one. So always read the prompt, right? Make sure you know what you're supposed to be giving. And then one additional accurate identifier is fine for a full identification. That can be the title, the date of creation, the materials. You can always give more information, and I always encourage my students to give lots of identifiers. Give as many as possible because, you know, why not just pad the answer a little bit, and then in case you got something wrong, you've got an extra. So tomorrow I will be reviewing this with you. So take a good look, and the video will be posted in case you want to go back and check this out at a later time today. And I just want to thank you guys for joining me today. I hope this is you know, not only something that you feel like you need to do for the AP exam, but maybe kind of a virtual field trip. Since we're all stuck in the house a little bit, you know, we can kind of travel through time and space and visit some of our favorite works of art and architecture and learn some stuff that's new also. Anybody that's having internet access problems, we know all of you probably that this is a reality for some students. So please make sure you reach out to the College Board at cb.org/tech so we can make sure that you're getting the content that you need. Thanks for coming today. Do the best you can with the circumstances as they are. And please remember to stay safe and stay healthy out there, art historians. Have a good one.